Hey guys, Sandro here from Carcraft Auto Detailing in Melbourne. Welcome to part 2 of how to professionally detail car rims. In part 1, I went through the cleaning and decontamination stages that are vital in preparing the rim for polishing and or protecting the finish. In this final episode, I'll be going through my process of inspecting the paint, selecting my products and tools, correcting the paint defects, and adding a durable coating to protect all my hard work. So firstly, now that the rim is truly clean and bare, I want to assess the paint scratches, defects and quality before any correction, as I like to gather as much information as possible about the vehicle, or in this case the rims. As I stated in part 1, what I was told would be done in painting these rims and what actually happened are two different things. So I'm going to do a little investigation of my own to determine what I really have to work with, as this will greatly aid in both getting the most out of the paint and doing it so in a safe manner. I already know just by looking at the inner side of the rim that the original paint hasn't been removed. So the new black paint has just been sprayed over the top, which again is contradictory to what I was told. And on the outer edges, the paint is already flaking and failing. As you can see, there is already a decent paint chip on the inner rim's barrel. Bad for the finish, but good for some paint thickness readings. So if I take a paint thickness reading on that chipped area and compare it to some readings where the paint is intact, it should tell me roughly how thick the new layer of black paint is on the inner rim barrel. So by my readings, the original silver paint is about 4.3 mils thick, and the thickness of the silver and the black paint together is roughly 5.3 mils. So that tells me that the new layer of paint in the inner barrel is only about 1mm thick, which is extremely thin, disappointing and very limiting as to how far I can correct that paint. In reality, the finish on the inner barrel area is quite poor, so it really would need some heavy correction to greatly improve the finish. But with only 1mm density of paint, that's just far too thin to do anything but some very light polishing. I can also tell at this stage, by the appearance and thickness of the paint, that the inner barrel hasn't been clear coated. That once again is not what I was told or what was agreed on. But just a simple test using any polish I have handy and a microfiber cloth can confirm my suspicions. If the paint is clear coated, the microfiber cloth won't pick up any of the black colour of the base coat. Whereas if it's not clear coated, I will pick up that black paint and transfer it onto my microfiber cloth. So just a quick hand polish has confirmed my suspicions that the inner barrel is only single stage paint, as you can clearly see the cloth has picked up the black paint. So onto the outer face of the rim. From a distance in lower lighting, the paint actually looks quite good. But in direct sunlight or with an inspection light, you can see that the finish is far from perfect, with many varying defects such as sanding marks, compound haze, blotchy stains and many scratches. Just by looking at the depth and finish of the face of the rim in comparison to the barrel, my guess is that it is clear coated. But the same quick test with some polish and a microfiber cloth truly confirms that it is. The biggest surprise, however, is the abundance of paint that's been applied, which is fantastic, but the disappointing part is the massive difference in the paint's thickness that peaks at over 28mm, which is kind of crazy thick, but then drops as low as 6mm, which is still good, but just a massive difference in thickness and finish. The truth is that I don't know if the face of the rim was sanded back or how much of the original paint was remaining once the black base coat and then clear coat was applied. So I can only guess by everything else I've discovered so far that perhaps half of the paint's thickness reading is the original paint beneath. Another quarter of that could potentially be the primer and base coat, and the last quarter could be the clear coat, which is ultimately what I'm really interested in. So that 28mm to 6mm thickness becomes about 7mm to about 1.5 of actual clear coat I have to work with. I hope that makes sense to you, as it could be a little confusing. But basically, unless you have an extremely advanced and expensive paint thickness gauge that can measure the different layers of paint such as primer, base coat and clear coat, you really have to do some investigation and estimations to determine how much of the overall paint is actually clear coat. So starting with the inner barrel of the rim, the paint is just so thin that I need to find a balance of both products and techniques that can improve the finish of the paint without removing almost any paint at all. CarPro Essence is a very unique all-in-one polish in that it not only corrects and protects the paint, but can also be used as a base layer for adding any C-quartz coating on top. Ultimately, I'm going to be using Essence as my base layer of protection in any case. So if I can improve the finish without having to firstly use another product, that's a real bonus and time-saving option. And as I can't really use any more aggressive compounds for fear of burning through this extremely thin paint, Essence really is the best option for this particular circumstance, as it is effective enough to polish and improve the finish to a certain level, but light and gentle enough to only remove the smallest amount of paint. I tend to mostly use Essence as a drilling polish with purely non-abrasive foam pads, but as in this circumstance, I want to create a little more cut to eliminate as many of the light defects as I can. So I'm going to use Essence with just a slightly abrasive polishing pad on a mild machine speed with little pressure that should provide a good balance of light cutting or correcting and still finish down quite well. The paint is ultimately going to decide if this combination of products and techniques works well, but as you can hopefully see, a couple of sets of passes is actually producing quite a different finish that is eliminating a large percentage of the defects and further deepening the finish. And quite honestly, with the paint and thickness I have to work with in this area, it's actually turning out a lot better than I would have guessed. Now I'm not as vain as to worry about the overall finish on the outer side of the wheel spokes, as they can't be seen once the rims are on the car. But while I'm here, a quick polish and seal with Essence is actually done more so to both further clean, seal and prepare the surface for C-quartz coatings. So if you are interested in fully protecting a rim with a coating, you need to ensure that every inch of that rim is cleaned and prepared to the highest level. And apart from removing the scratches and imperfections from the paint, polishing is also yet another cleaning and decontamination stage in the paint's preparation for adding any protection. I'll also add that the Ripper's Nano Hybrid is a true legend when it comes to rims. Is it perfect? Not at all. But then again, what equipment is? You do need to take your time and use it with care, especially on a set of rims like these. And although I could still get the job done without this tool, using my rotary buffer with a 1-inch pad and extension bar, honestly it would be more limiting and more fatiguing. I'll further add that because of the very intricate nature of this rim, I'm just using the Ripper's Nano on a straight rotary mode, as the throw from the dual action oscillation could possibly cause damage to the surrounding surfaces. So onto the outer face of the rim, and where the serious work begins. So when correcting any paint, it's really best to start with the least aggressive polish and pad you feel could possibly get the results you're after. For my testing, I'm starting with Manzana's 2400 polish on the Ripper's yellow polishing pad with a slow speed on my machine to see how the paint responds. After just a quick set of passes, I'm already getting quite a bit of information about this paint. The scratches and other defects are actually being removed with very little effort. But the finish is not all that great, with slight hazing and micro marring. So immediately I'm thinking this is soft paint, as Manzana's 2400 is a relatively light polish, as is the Ripper's yellow pad and the slow machine speed I'm using. So to further confirm this and see what a step down in polish produces, I'm going to try Manzana's 3500 super fine polish. For the most part, the defects have once again been removed, but the finish is much better with less haze and marring, but it seems like the wipe off of the polish itself is causing some light scratches. So I think it's safe to say that this clear coat is not only soft, but unfortunately super soft paint. As I stated before, I'm going to be using CarPro's Essence as my base layer of protection before applying the C-Quartz coating. And as this paint is so soft, Essence should really have no issue correcting the defects. And a quick test actually confirms that. But as I want to make sure that Essence is truly correcting the paint and not just feeling the imperfections, a quick wipe down with CarPro Eraser, which is an alcohol-based cleaner, removes Essence's sealant, so that I can truly see if it's correcting the paint. And it turns out that it really is, as well as producing the best finish out of the 3 products I've tested. So now I have my product, pad and technique sorted, it's time to get down to business. The hardest areas to correct will be the smaller triangular holes in between the large circular rings, which are also the worst finish areas from the paint job, as these small triangle recesses are too small, even for the Ripper's Nano to access, so I'll have to do some hand polishing to best access those areas. Realistically, hand polishing is not only harder and more time consuming, but also far more difficult to achieve the same quality of finish you can by a machine. As much as I'd like to get those areas 90 to 95% perfect, I know from previous experience that it's a hard call. But I also know that I can certainly improve those areas, and that's the main goal here. These rims overall are certainly not an ideal situation. From the extreme intricate and hard to access design that I personally love aesthetically, but hate when it comes to correcting them, to the varying levels of finish, defects and quality of the paint, all of which makes this job quite challenging and testing. But to look at the bright side of things, almost any job that comes after it should be a nice downhill ride. So using just a hand foam pad and a little product, I'm spending about 5 minutes or so on each of these 7 little triangular recesses, which although isn't giving me a perfect finish, it's definitely improving on it. But it's also definitely leaving my hands in a worse for wear condition. I'll also add that I purposely did the hand polishing first, as I know it's the hardest job on the face of these rims, and definitely best to get it done earlier on in my experience. Now, the rest of the polishing is going to be completed using the Nano iBread, and for the most part the footage should be fairly self-explanatory. But I'm just going to go through some of the general methods, techniques, and things that may be useful if you're faced with correcting the paint on rims or when working with soft paints such as this. So firstly, there's the polisher speed. In general, the smaller the pad size you're using, the greater the speed that's required to correct the paint. But as this is a very soft paint, I'm not really going any faster than speed 2, which is about 2500 RPM on the Ripper's Nano Polisher. Basically, as I discovered in my test section, the softness of this paint allows the scratches and defects to be eliminated relatively easy. So there's no need to be any more aggressive. However, the greater challenge with this paint is trying to finish down without any haze, marring or micro scratches left behind. And even more so is ensuring that very little pressure is being used when the polish residue is being wiped off, as I've discovered for myself that the extreme softness of this paint is even sensitive to soft microfiber cloths. What's also going to help greatly is using only light pressure with the polisher, making sure it keeps moving to avoid any holograms on the finish, which on your softer paint types with a rotary polisher isn't always the easiest thing to achieve. And most of all is ensuring that I take my time in avoiding hitting the paint with the edges of the backing plate or the polisher itself. And with the very tight space in the design of these rims, that's a challenge in itself. And although you may be tempted to polish a large area of the rim in one go, if you really are looking to achieve the best possible finish, working a small section at a time and thoroughly checking your results before you move on to the next section is really the best way to ensure you do produce the best finish you can. So on to coating the rim. As CarPro Essence is both a polish and a base layer sealant for C-quartz coatings, I don't want to use eraser or any IPA wipe down before applying C-quartz Deluxe over the top, as I don't want to remove the sealant that Essence has left behind. So just a final wipe down with a clean microfiber cloth is all that's needed. My advice when using Essence before a coating is to give it a good couple of hours to cure before applying your coating, or you may find that the coating will remove at least some of the sealant. Application wise, just start with a strip of the product or about half a dozen small dots on your microsuede applicator to initially prime it, and then just add about half a dozen drops for each additional section as you go. The main goal is to apply it as evenly and as quick as possible. As if your applicator doesn't make contact with every inch of the paint, it simply won't protect those areas. And if you continuously work the product for too long, you'll both be gathering it back onto your applicator and causing it to prematurely flash and cure, leaving a poor streaky finish. So just using one or two quick vertical and horizontal swipes to lay it down is the best way to go. And as always, use adequate light to check each section before you move on to the next. To create a true flat even finish, the coating needs to be evened out with a cloth once it has just begun to flash. How long that takes will depend on the temperature and climate, but for me on this slightly cold day, it was just over 5 minutes or so. I've gone through the process of applying Sequartz Deluxe more thoroughly in my Julieta QV video series. So if you have more questions or just want a little more information about it, just have a look at those videos first. The same basic technique is used to coat the entire rim. The only real variant is that on a set of rims such as these, you'll most likely need to remove the micro suede cloth from the backing block and just use it on its own to access and apply the coating in the smaller, tighter sections. It's also best to use two microfiber cloths for your wipe down process. The first is for gathering the bulk of the coating's high spots or streaks, and the second is for eliminating or gathering the smaller slight imperfections in the finish. I'll also add that it was a bit of a race on these rims to even out the high spots on the coating before it had permanently cured, as all the sharp curves and recesses did prove quite difficult to access and level down with the microfiber cloths in a speedy manner. After Seaquartz Deluxe has had a good 3 to 4 hours to further harden and cure, my final step is applying CarPro Reload as a top layer sealant to both seal the finish and further protect it. During the first 24 hours is when almost any coating is at its most vulnerable, as it needs time to continue curing and to bond to the paint. So the use of a sealant such as Reload will help protect the coating during this more fragile stage. And as I've said before, both the increased look and protection of most coatings take a good week or so to be achieved. And it's probably more like a month or so in general that coating reaches its maximum ability to both protect and look its best. So think of it as a small investment that you firstly have to care for, so that in the end you can then care for your vehicle. Hopefully by the footage you can see that although the finish isn't what I'd call perfect, it is however a massive improvement. And I'd say about as perfect as these particular rims could potentially look. The real issues and challenges with correcting and protecting these rims started with a substandard paint job, and I was then further tested with dealing with some seriously soft, sensitive paint that quite honestly is just such a bad paint type for wheels in particular, as we all know the abuse that rims take and the grime they quickly accumulate, and no matter how gentle and caring you may be, there is just no getting around that soft paint on rims will rapidly scratch, chip and mar. Add the fact that this is really a tough rim design to access and correct, and hopefully you can appreciate a more honest evaluation and result, rather than me just telling you it all went smoothly and the finish is perfect. The best thing I could have done is coat them with Seaquartz Deluxe, as this coating should greatly aid in protecting the rim's paint from rapidly deteriorating. However, I've said it before that although coatings are far and away the best protection for automotive paint, bar paint protection film, they're not some indestructible magic shield as many coating manufacturers may have you believe. So although the coating will definitely make a great positive impact to maintaining these rims, it's not going to fix a poor quality paint job or rectify the extremely soft paint. It will however improve on dealing with these situations. I hope many of you out there found this video informative and useful. Please like, comment and subscribe to show your support. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.